Video ini berisi rekaman presentasi dari Mr. Olivier Decamp, Technical Director Grobest Group, dengan judul Nursery Pond Protocol to Reduce EMS or AHPND Risk, yang dipresentasikan pada acara Indonesia Shrimp Forum Webinar Series Trend of Shrimp Nursery Technology in Southeast Asia, yang diadakan pada tanggal 10 Juni 2021 dan diselenggarakan oleh Forum Udang Indonesia bekerjasama dengan Grobest, CJ Indonesia, dan USSEC. Selamat menyaksikan.
Thank you very much. Good morning. To share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right. First, so good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I will be giving this presentation in English. I think there is no translation in Bahasa, so I'll try to speak slowly, and I hope everybody can follow my presentation. So the subject of the talk is about EMS, AHPND, and how a nursery can help contribute to solve the problem with EMS. And then I will explain a bit more how Growbest can support farmers in that challenge. So I'm not sure how much people are familiar with Growbest. So first I will introduce Growbest. The company was founded in 1974. It's a company located in Taiwan. And from the very beginning, Grobest has been focusing on nutrition, but also disease reduction control. And has done that focusing on shrimp and high-value fish. The company is located in the 8 major shrimp producing countries in Asia. And we have, of course, our own feed plant in Indonesia with the right certification and quality. Now, one of the uniqueness of Growbest is functional feed and functional additives. And by that, I mean the company has its own expertise in these additives because it has its own R&D and production site where it develops its own additives to produce them in Taiwan and in China. And these additives are then delivered to all our aquafeed plants and incorporated in our feed. To basically develop these through our R&D, produce these additives at our sites, and then deliver them to our feed mills for inclusion and for the production of our unique functional feed. This gives you an idea of the different additives that are being manufactured by Growbest. And as you can see, each of the 4 mix that are mentioned here have unique characteristics. Some of them have a focus on attractability, palatability, others on the immunostimulation, other on the hepatopancreas and the gut health, and others on more damage or antioxidant. So that allows Growbest to blend, if you want, these different additives according to the benefits expected of the feed. Grobest also manufactured its own minerals, chelated minerals. So we have this in-house expertise on these additives and organic chelated minerals. And this is what is in a way unique about the company, is that if you look on the priority of most aquafeed company, the focus is on crude protein, the sourcing of premium protein source, looking at the feed energy, and maybe looking at the trace nutrition supplement. But when we look at the farmer, what the farmer wants is basically a higher survival rate, link it to better growth. This gives you higher yield and therefore more profitability. And this is where we can help at Growbest, because we have these different functional feeds that can lead ultimately to better survival rate and growth and better profitability for the farmer. An idea to explain it to you, because it's linked to EMS problem. If you look at all these additives that I mentioned to you earlier, where we test them at our facilities in Taiwan, we're able, for example, to see how we can improve the overall gut health, in the sense that when we challenge our shrimp with Vibrio, and we can document the value of these specific additives on the overall gastrointestinal health, looking, for example, at the feces appearance, quality, consistency, and the same with the white feces. So we can document the effect of our functional feeds on the hepatopancreas health, looking at the tubes, and the tubes that you have in the hepatopancreas, looking at the overall lipid vacuole content, and so the overall health of the gut of the animal. And what it means is all these ingredients are then combined in order to deliver what would be described as daily healthcare feed, or immune enhanced or growth enhanced feed. And they are then combined, if you want. So all our additives that we developed in-house are combined and incorporated in diets that can be for the daily healthcare, for nutrient supply of daily feeding, the growth enhanced, where we focus really on boosting the growth with the right FCI and so on, or the immune enhanced. Okay, now let's look at EMS. As you know, EMS, initially when it was identified, the causative agent of EMS was defined as a strain of Vibrio parahemolyticus, but more specifically, it was strains of Vibrio parahemolyticus. They contain plasmid that encoded for the production of specific genes. So the very beginning, when EMS was understood, it became a focus on that species of Vibrio parahemolyticus. But with time, we found that other Vibrio can carry the same genes. And as you can see from the updated FAO document on the shrimp acute hepatopancreatic necrosis disease with the strategy manual, they look from the parahemolyticus, and basically, as it is right now, we basically have 4 other species of Vibrio that have been found as also causing AHPND. Next step, we know, of course, that not only you have the production of these toxins by these plasmid-carrying Vibrio, but as you have problem with the AHPND, you have secondary bacterial colonization. So in the end, you start to understand that the focus is no more specifically on Vibrio parahemolyticus, but on basically Vibrio and how these communicate among each other, but also specifically how we can control these in our production. EMS, we know it can give you mass mortality, 100%, and it's hitting the farmer very early on in the cycle. This is why it was called initially early mortality syndrome. But basically, it hits the animal in the first 30-35 days of culture. There again, if you look at the FAO manual, exactly the same points. So we know we basically have to focus on the first month of the crop. When you look at that, and you look at the traditional grow-out cycle, that means after your 20-25 days of hatchery, and you have your, it depends on the culture methods, but overall between 90 and 130 days of cycle, the high risk is basically in these first 30 days of the cycle. And of course, this is where the nursery can come in, because the nursery is really the period of a phase of culture that tackles that critical phase of farming of the first 30 days. So nursery obviously was seen as a critical, as a new step, if you want. It's not really new, but as a step in the production cycle that would allow you to tackle the period of farming, which is seen with the highest risk for EMS. And what I'm saying here is something that has been documented and reported from the very beginning when EMS hit farmers, that if you look at nursery, it can allow you to really monitor the PL from the first few days post-hatchery until you transfer them to the grow-out pond. And when you have a problem, you can monitor more easily, of course, but it allows you also to destroy the animals if they are confirmed as positive for EMS. So nursery was seen as a very important part to control the challenge. So why is that? Well, the nursery, there are different ways of running nurseries, but it has the option to be really a high biosecurity facility. And it allows you basically to produce PLs in high density from PL 10, 12 for a period of time that range from 1 week up to 4 weeks. But it's a facility that allows you to really control the entry of the pathogen more easily than in the grow-out farm. You can also control the feeding more efficiently, and it allows you to improve the overall productivity, but also the quality of the animal that you produce. And because it's a system where you have better control, you can also control the feeding, control the water quality more efficiently, have water exchange if required, but also allows you to control the organic waste accumulation like you would do in a hatchery. And if you do that, if you control more efficiently the accumulation of organic waste, you can also reduce or manage the Vibrio populations more efficiently. So why is nursery important? Is because you control the animals when they come in, you look at their health status, but you can also control the entry of the Vibrio more efficiently. And if you have Vibrio in the facility, by controlling the feeding, but also controlling the water quality and the organic waste, you prevent the growth, the explosive growth of the Vibrio. Next, it allows you to transfer the animal in the grow-out pond when animals are stronger, more robust. So you limit the exposure of the PL10, PL20, the early stage shrimp, to the less controlled condition that you have in the grow-out pond. So this is why the nursery is of interest. Now, there's some points to consider when you look at the nursery. The design, as I mentioned, there are many different designs considered. What you do for the water treatment before the stocking, the way you manage the day-to-day operation or water quality and feeding, but also how you take care of the transfer of the PL at the end of the phase, of the nursery phase, before you move them into the grow-out pond or the second phase nursery in some countries. So these are examples coming from Vietnam. So where typically you would have the PLs delivered from the hatchery to the nursery. You have obviously evaluation first on their health status. These animals were checked for pathogens overall, so confirming they are clean. You look at their health status overall, observation, but also the packaging, the bags that are used to carry the PLs from the hatchery to the nursery and the farm are treated, are soaked in water that has some disinfectant in there. So to make sure that the outer packaging, if you would, is clean. After that, you transfer it to the nursery tank pond to acclimate for the water temperature. You then check your PL numbers correctly, and then once you have confirmation of the PL health status numbers, and then you are sure they are acclimatized, you can release them into your tank. So important points is the animals are checked, the animals are, the packaging are clean, so you reduce the entry, the possible point of entry of Vibrio into your system. Once they are acclimatized, you then release them. Other point, of course, when you operate in nursery is that you can control your feeding more efficiently. The feed can be spread throughout the tank in a more homogenized way. And of course, you can evaluate the feed intake very easily. And you can also, by looking at the remaining feed into your tank, but also through regular observation of the shrimp. So it's very easy for you for the farmer to evaluate the feed intake and the feed use. Now, what did we do? I want to give you an example of operations in Vietnam. So this is a nursery diet, specifically in Vietnam. So you have the protein content and lipid content measured here. So 45% protein and 5% lipid. With the overall specs of the diet. Now, that diet was evaluated first under semi-commercial experimental setup. Give you an idea here. So, of course, as I mentioned to you, it's very important to make sure you work with quality animals. In the case of Vietnam, we work with SIS rootstock. These animals were confirmed for the SPF status, and then they were stocked. The density was 2,000 kilo per cubic meter, and in this case, the nursery phase was 20 days. So you have a set of conditions here. So temperature conditions are within the optimal range. pH, and of course, DO is maintained way higher than 5 milligram per liter. We are aiming, in this case, almost at 6 on average. And it gives you an idea of what you can obtain if you invest in these nursery diet. You can maintain the rearing conditions optimal, but you can also look at a very good growth rate. So by investing in the quality feed, you can have a good growth rate and also do it while you maintain a very good FCR. So that was a balance of having clean animals when you stock them in, validating, optimizing the management of the rearing conditions, and using the right feed to give you the best growth and best FCR during that nursery phase. But if you do, this shows you a bit of a nursery system in Vietnam, so under commercial conditions. You have here again the different stocking conditions that we use. Here we use a range of PLs coming from different hatcheries. And as you can see at the end of the culture period, in the 21 to 26 days, coming from 2 different hatcheries, the kind of FCR to obtain and growth rate. So you are operating here under conditions where you can have as mentioned again, very good FCR, good growth rate, whatever the quality of the peel you started from. Now, I want to leave enough time to discuss because it's an interesting point here. Our experience when we look at EMS and why we believe nursery is a very critical phase to include into the production cycle. What can you do when you work with the nursery phase? First, biosecurity. Now, you will look at different level of investment in biosecurity, whether you work with a totally controlled indoor system, or whether you work with a system which is the other extreme would be grow-out ponds, which is a small grow-out pond where you have much more limited biosecurity. But in both cases, you can operate your water quality and feed management more efficiently because you have a higher stocking density, it's a shorter period of time, and you can operate it more efficiently. So the nursery will allow you in any case to manage better, to improve biosecurity, feeding, and water quality. Even if you ignore these 3 points, the nursery phase allows you to basically evaluate the health status of the shrimp at the point of entry, so L10, and before you transfer them to the pond, grow-out pond. So that means in any situation, you will have the certainty that the animals that you transfer into your grow-out ponds when they are at the time PL30 or PL40 are clean of EMS, of AHPND. You can check it, but you can also check them for other pathogens. EHP, for example, is another very critical one in most countries in Asia. So it allows you to validate, to be sure that you stock animals that are strong and healthy, at least clean of pathogen. Then, by using the function feed, you can make these animals robust before they are transferred into the more stressful environment of a grow-out pond. And it allows you really to look at the growth and the health of the peels at the end of the nursery, but also at the very first few weeks of the grow-out cycle in the pond. So you have this critical phase. Now, if you look at the example of Vietnam, what you see is not only you have this nursery grow-out, but you can have an additional phase. You can have 3 phase, even 4 phase farming. And the idea being that you have at each phase of farming, optimize stocking density and optimize use of management of water and feed. So at the end, what we want is to have a higher yield and better profitability. And we do that by focusing on survival and growth, even during the challenge of EMS. Now, if you want to discuss more in details about the different protocols, these are the contact details of our 2 main people, Akeli and Pakazan, who can give you more details about the rearing conditions and protocol that we have here. Thank you very much, and I look forward to discussing them more in details with the audience. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Olivier, for the presentations. Now I would like to give opportunities to the participants to ask questions either by typing or raise hand and speak directly. Is there any? Ada yang mau bertanya dari presentasi Olivier tadi? Silakan. Pakai bahasa Indonesia nggak apa-apa, nanti kita translate. Ayo, come on, don't be shy. Silakan kalau ada yang bertanya kepada Olivier Decamp, mudah-mudahan mereka, I hope they understand your presentation because it's in English.
Yeah, this is my worry.
Pak Mudi di kolom chat, chat itu ada pertanyaan.
Yeah, all right. So there is one question. It's not for myself. The name is still Pamudi. So what is critical point for transferring PLs in grow out pond?
Okay, so I would say the biggest thing, we want to reduce differences in the water quality parameters that you have in the nursery and in the grow out pond. So on the oxygen, on the pH, on the water parameters overall, try to have the conditions as close as possible. So at the very end of your nursery, you may adapt the conditions of the water to make sure they are close to those of your pond to avoid the stress. And the second, you want to make sure that the animals from the nursery, the grapple, the transfer is done efficiently. So what we experienced in different countries was, it's a different, the way of managing it. You need to have your crew, your team, very efficient. It's not something that can be, I would put, improvised. You know, you need to make sure that the team, you harvest your nursery tank, you check the quality, you count the numbers of ready, and then you have a team that goes to transfer to the pond and back and forth. So you can look at different investment in equipment for the transfer. You can do it manually, or you can go with pumping, depends on your setup, or gravity. It depends how your farm is equipped. But I would say the biggest challenge that we've seen is make sure that the shrimp are prepared the last couple of days of the nursery before they are moved to the pond, to avoid too much a shock, if you want, in the difference of the water quality parameters.
All right, merci. There is a second question here. Is there a specific requirements or conditions on the size of the nursery ponds?
I would say the answer is no, because what we've seen is such a wide range of conditions. By that, I mean, if you operate, your nursery setup at a farm has to be adapted to the conditions of the farmer, okay? So the main point is to work with the farmer to make sure that the nursery they set up is adapted to their needs and that they are able to manage it properly. The main point I would say is shading overall. Of course, it's good to have shading. A design that allows you to have optimal aeration, yes. But after that, the size, you have to adapt it more or less to the condition of the farm. We have experience from Thailand or Vietnam and from our previous job Latin America of different setup. And we can share recommendations that we have about the optimal design or aeration. But I don't think we should force farmers to invest in a certain design that could be very costly. We should first work together with them to make sure the recommendation match their needs and the level of investment they can place in the design. So it's a more question of working together with them to make sure the nursery phase is adapted to their demands.
All right, I think there's another question. It's almost similar than the previous one. What is the best design or layouts for the nursery system in farm area?
So what we've seen is basically a round, okay, round tanks. If you ask me what I believe in, I prefer round, indoor, or very good shading, so you control as much as possible the conditions, stable. Aeration combining circulation and bottom, and a system that allows you smooth, easy removal of organic waste that accumulates in there. So you must have a system of siphoning, water exchange, which is as easy to implement as possible. And round, because it allows you to homogenize in the water, in the system. We also have protocols because you need to stop aeration for a period of time until you can have accumulation of the waste in a certain area. So you must be efficient at that point to remove the waste and re-increase oxygen as fast as possible to avoid too much stress on the shrimp.
All right, thank you. I think the question from Pak Kristianto Agung is almost similar and it's answered already, but you are free to ask for more. So the next question is, what is the preventive maintenance when in new publication, not only VP or Vibrio cause EMS or AHPND?
I think if you look at EMS, control of Vibrio in a way for any of hatchery or nursery, the protocols are fairly straightforward on disinfection, control of biofilm, treatment of the pipes, water pipes. These are, I think, fairly standard protocol. The challenge we are facing in many countries is the need to go an extra step to control EHP. So I would say for Vibrio control, there are a lot of protocols well documented. I think farmers know what to do. The challenge has been what we've seen in Vietnam or Thailand. How do we implement EHP control in addition to the Vibrio control? So this means, for example, working much more on the pH. There are a lot of studies ongoing about the different optimal treatments to control EHP, which I think is a major issue before you transfer to the grow-out pond. But for Vibrio, I think is a standard water and biofilm treatment. We can give you names separately of product or protocol when we comment, there's no problem. Yes, I would say it's the main point.
Thank you. The next one is most of the complaint from the farmers about nursery, product is the issue with uniformities. How to deal with it? That's the question.
I think if you look at the way of managing nursery, I think at the very beginning, people were using grow-out feeds. That would be maybe broken sieve, but it was looked at applying a standard grow-out feed. And let's not forget, these animals, when you put them in a high concentration in a nursery, I think cost-wise, the investment in higher quality feeds, more designed for nursery, I think makes sense cost-wise. And then you can make sure that each of your PL have access to good feeds. So you can afford this investment. And what you see is then the size variation will reduce and becomes much more manageable. So this is what we saw, for example, in Vietnam. By developing these diets, which are specific for nursery, we could see that we can control this size variation much more efficiently. Initially, farmers had to try something. So they looked at what the market was. They looked at the physical in the infrastructure, and then they used the same feed that they had to the ponds, just in a different infrastructure. But we moved from there into now a system where we can optimize the nutrition for these animals by increasing some of the key ingredients, for example, or additives.
Thanks. But I think it also depends on the duration in the nursery system.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Do you have any recommendation days that we can nurse the PLs? Maximum.
I would. What I see is most of the people with good performance are around 20 days.
All right.
What I've seen, but I would not say 20 days is the magical rule, But if I look at the feedback we got overall, this has been around the period of time where we see. My worry was when people call nursery something which in fact is taking only 1 week or 4 or 5 days, because it's not a nursery anymore. What you do is more acclimation, and you check whether the animals are healthy, you check whether you have signs of disease, and then that's it. This is a bit too short, I think, to strengthen the PLs and check them for these first 3-4 weeks of the crop. So I would not go for 4 or 5 days nursery. I would go for a longer period of time. But maybe 30 days is very hard to manage. This is what I think 20 seems to be the kind of balance between the two extremes.
Right. Okay, thanks. There's another question here. I'm not sure if I capture it right. How the system for nursery, Biofloc, semi-floc, etc. If grow out use different system, can it be a problem?
So again, you mean how to operate a nursery with like Biofloc or semi-Biofloc?
I think the question is about different system between nursery and grow out,
Okay.
like for example, things like that.
Okay, now I'm talking not based on experience at Grobest, but more my overall experience, okay, with this. So I'm not representing any recommendation there. What I would say is that if you look at a Biofloc, semi-Biofloc system, the typical problem you face is with water quality, ammonium nitrite, after 3 weeks or 4 weeks is when you start to hit some challenges. The advantage of nursery or multiple phase farming is that you move every 4 weeks from one system to the next one. So you could operate with the design that the farmer likes, Biofloc, semi-Biofloc, whatever. But when they feel the system gets not balanced anymore, they transfer again to starting fresh, if you want. And it allows them, like many farmers in Vietnam, it allows them, if you want, to have optimal conditions for 4 weeks. You then have the challenge of how you transfer from that phase to the next one. As the animals get bigger, it gets more challenging. But this has been, I think, one way that is probably allowing people to produce despite the hurdle they were facing in the past with the Biofloc, semi-Biofloc. The system is nice, but you have problems typically at that time. So this is how nursery and multiple phase can allow you to cope with that fluctuation, the challenge.
All right, thank you. Another question is, do you suggest continuous feeding rather than frequent feeding in the nursery? I mean.
Yes. What we have people working with 5-6 feedings per day in the nursery. This is what we have. We knew people using continuous, almost auto feeder in the nursery, and so we had, I would say, between 4 and 6 feedings per day on average. Is what we've seen in many of the countries we worked with. Yes, but we saw people investing in auto feeder as well. So. My recommendation are more related to the challenge of farmers who feel they need to invest in a lot of things in order to have the nursery. To think they have to invest in a very expensive, maybe infrastructure, and their expectations may be too high, assuming you invest in all this infrastructure, it's going to work. It's still something that requires more technical knowledge than for the technicians that typically grow at ponds. So sometimes focusing step-by-step improvements on aeration, this you have to. And then feeding, you can still do it manually. If you see it's working well, then once you have your aeration under control, water exchange under control, then you can look at that. But auto feeder is not a requirement to have an efficient nursery.
All right, understood. Thanks. And the next question is, in the presentation, you're using high crude protein, and it is recommended. I think it's about formulation. Is it the animal-based crude protein or plant-based crude protein that you're using? Is there any relation with the Vibrio species colony in the waste when you compare these two?
Oh, okay. I mean, the typical problem that you will see with Vibrio growth is going to be linked to the accumulation of organic waste. as nutrient source for the Vibrio to grow. So rather than, okay, the higher the protein content, the higher the possible risk of having this organic waste available for growth, first ammonia problem and bacterial growth. So we formulated at 45 because with we work with marine protein and some plant-based protein. We have access to both. But we really looked at palatability, digestibility. So with diet that are very palatable, so control them as fast as possible, good digestibility. After that, you may have the best diet. If the nursery is not managed the correct way, you're still gonna have pockets with accumulation of organic waste that will give you this Vibrio growth. So I would say the main point is to look at diets that can be very palatable, digestible. And after that, it's secondary in a way. I think when you look at whether it should be a benefit of pure plant-based or animal-based protein source, regarding the problem we talked about here, specifically about Vibrio growth, I think I would rather focus on feed stability, palatability, and digestibility.
All right, it's probably my next question to that. Is there any specific amino acid or fatty acid that you are targeting for nursery feed?
Well, it's a good question, and I'm afraid I cannot disclose. This is part of the uniqueness of an aquafeed company, you know, the way they formulate. So I can totally respect the intellectual desire to understand, but I cannot disclose. I apologize for that. I cannot answer.
Sure, no problem, no problem. Okay, the next question is, what is the optimum density in the nursery pond?
Okay. What we see right now, okay, if you look at the density between, you start at 2, you can go up to 8 or 10 per liter, okay? The higher the density, it all comes down to the challenges faced by the farmer, okay? If the facility is fixed and you have demand for your pond that are quite high, the farmer has no choice. He needs to increase the stocking density in his nursery, no choice. So he may go for 7, 8, 10 per liter because no choice. If you have more flexibility, no doubt that 2 or 3 per liter seems to be a concentration that gives you very good growth, consistency, and less problems on water quality management than the higher the density. So if it's up to me and I have my facility, I will go for 2 to 3. But if I have no choice and the value of nursery to control Vibrio is most important to avoid that you have direct stocking in your pond, then I will go with whatever density I have to do, and I would do with it, you know, to adapt to the conditions I have until I can expand my nursery facility with time. Does it answer your question?
Yeah. So there's another question here. What is the maximum distance between nursery facility areas to the pond grow out areas? Or maybe the duration, maximum duration of transfer, something like that?
That's a good question. It's a tough one. What I have seen, I've seen operation in Latin America where they have very long distance, but they have a whole investment in pumping system. So this is one extreme, if you want, where you have high investment. What I saw is operation that are, I would say, a few hundred meters, typically, gravity feed, and others that may go like maybe 1.5 kilometer motorcycle type transfer or truck base. If the question is about biosecurity risk, what I would make sure is focus my nursery is located as close as possible to my farm to avoid stress on the animal. and the investment in infrastructure, but having that facility physically isolated from the grow-out pond. So whatever you have in your grow-out pond cannot come into your nursery phase that is supposed to be of high biosecurity. That's what I would focus on, but not so much counting the meters, if you want, rather make sure it's well protected.
All right, thanks. There's another question the question is, do we need to set up like phase 1, phase 2 nursery system, or just one phase is sufficient?
If you look at the market, Vietnam is one country going for multiple phase, 3 phase, 4 phase, definitely. If you look in Thailand, it's still very much 1 phase or 2 phase farming. I think I would go probably focusing on nursery and grow-out pond first, because the challenge is to see what is the market size of your shrimp and the carrying capacity of your current system as you have. If you optimize your nursery and then have your grow-out pond, you can operate maybe your grow-out pond at acceptable stocking density, not too challenging, because you know that you can increase your rotation of your grow-out pond thanks to your nursery, where you gain 1 month in your grow-out. You may be able to operate with profits without stressing your grow-out pond too much. If it's not working and you need to increase your density, then you may need to consider the need to go into more phases. But don't forget, multiple phase requires a lot of investment in infrastructure, energy, electricity. It's a lot of investment. So I think it's better to probably optimize nursery grow-out.
All right. There is one question here. Do we need additional minerals in nursery tanks run in RAS, recirculation system or Biofloc system? That's the question.
Okay. What I know in our all the data we have from Vietnam, the mineral water, the mineral content is checked and adaptive required. So we have protocols for that. Yes. Now, I would not say you need to apply that amount at that day, whatever. It's just we have people in the field, they analyze water quality, they see if it fits in the range that we have set up, and accordingly they add or not minerals. This is the way. There again, I think if you're interested, I can ask Pakeli Pagdani to share with the people the specs that we use for the minerals, so people can see what would be our recommendation. Our technical team has all this information.
All right, thank you. I think this is the last question. Sorry, I have to mute all first. About water preparation for nursery system. What is the best water treatment for nursery besides using UV that can prevent disease more effectively? It's basically water preparation for nursery. You're still muted.
Sorry,
okay.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so I'm trying to think based on all the nurseries that I've seen. I've seen nurseries with very limited water treatment, okay? They focus on water coming from the reservoir they grow out pond. They had some biocide application, chlorination and whatever. They cleaned the facility very well. Water was treated and used the water from the grow out pond. What they focused on was more physical separation from the grow out pond. That's it. We have seen then other model where people go for all the investment in super high quality water treatment. The whole thing. My worry is that farmers think the only option for them is to invest in all this very expensive water quality treatments. And this is why I'm a bit reluctant to advertise or promote one of these, because I think the benefit of Nursery is not necessary in that. You can have the best water quality, the cleanest water quality. And after that, you mess it up by not optimizing the rest. And so what I've seen, whether it is Latin America, Thailand, and some of those also in Vietnam, some of them do not operate with the most expensive water treatment. It's more basic, but they really manage the operation very well on the feeding and water treatment during the crop. And I think I would focus more on that, because don't forget, you can have the cleanest water. When you have a clean water, that means it's virgin, it's available for colonization. And if you don't maintain your feed management and waste very well, you have a super clean water, and the first bacteria to grow will be Vibrio. So I would rather focus on maintaining that balance of water during the crop, rather than start with the super clean water that after that will be colonized by Vibrio.
All right, I think that's all the answers. Due to the limited time, I would like to thank Olivier Decamp, merci beaucoup for all the answers. But before we close, please provide a final statement or summary of the questions and answers that we have today.
Well, I would just say, first, thank you very much for the very nice discussion. Some difficult questions, but good one. The reason I believe in Nursery for EMS is because you add another phase in your farming where you control parameters. In the grow-out part, it's very difficult to control. In Nursery, you should look at Nursery as a way of optimizing culture in a critical period of time, and think of ways to optimize it without necessarily looking at, you need to build a crazy building with all the investment. You don't need to do that necessarily. You can do other things that can work on improving your production. Looking at biosecurity, feed, water treatment. This is why Nursery is important. Not necessarily looking at the most impressive picture you can see on a farm, but how you can really optimize for your condition on the farm.
All right, thanks a lot, Olivier Decamp. I wish that we can hand clap and you can hear. So thank you again. The next session is going to be full in Bahasa. You are free to join, or maybe Pak Ye, maybe Pak Ye or Pak Hasan can summarize for you later on. So I hope to see you in Bangkok someday. Thank you. So
I hope so.
Pak Mahmudi, nggak foto dulu, Pak.
Thanks. Oh yeah, hold a second. We will have a group photo. Can everyone please switch on your video for photo session? Ana bisa di foto Ana?
Ana nggak ada, Pak. Pak Hari Yuli, tolong.
Oh, siapa
Pak.
jadi? Pak Hari, silakan.
1, 2, 3, page 1. We have 6 pages here. One more. The second page. And the third page. One more. Page 4. Page 5. And last page is 6. Okay, done.
Right, thank you, Pak Hari.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier. So before we go to the next session, I would like to give opportunity to Pak Budi. Pak Budi, silakan cerita sedikit tentang FUI sebelum kita mulai ke sesinya Pak Harismu tadi. Silakan Pak Budi.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Mahmudi, para hadirin serta webinar yang saya hormati. Terima kasih atas keikutsertaannya dalam webinar ini. Jadi secara singkat saja, FUI ini adalah suatu forum yang menampung dari hulu ke hilir, ya, pemikiran-pemikiran dari hulu ke hilir. Kami sebenarnya secara formal baru ada pada tanggal 1 Januari 2021, tapi sebenarnya kami sudah mulai diskusi sejak kurang lebih 2 tahun yang lalu, ya. Nah, itu kira-kira FUI. Nah, saat ini kami selain masalah penyederhanaan perizinan yang kami terus berkomunikasi dengan pemerintah, ada hal-hal yang kami fokuskan, yaitu tentang upaya menghadapi penyakit yang dihadapi oleh teman-teman petambak. Yang FUI sedang buat adalah kami sedang dalam proses membuat SOP, budidaya udang yang berkelanjutan. Kemudian kami juga dalam proses pembuatan untuk panduan teknis pembuatan IPAL minimalis, ya mudah-mudahan dalam 2 atau 3 bulan lagi bisa kami publish. Dan yang terakhir, webinar ini adalah awal dari kami untuk membuat suatu panduan tentang nursery. Karena menurut pandangan dari kami dari FUI bahwa IPAL dan nursery ini adalah salah satu upaya yang perlu kita lakukan secara bersama seluruh Indonesia dalam upaya untuk menanggulangi penyakit dan bisa meningkatkan produksi udang Indonesia. Saya kira itu. Jadi mohon dari para peserta semua, ini adalah deklarator dari Forum Udang Indonesia, adalah Pak Agus Soma, Pak Bambang Widido, saya sendiri sebagai ketua, Pak Coco sebagai sekjen, kemudian Pak Denny Mulyono dari Pakan, Pak Gunawan Mulyono ada, Pak Hardi Bitoyo, Pak Haris Mufadi, Pak Hari Yuli, Pak Joko Sasongko, Pak Nengah Sarjana, Pak Pamudi, Pak Sudari Pawiro, Profesor Sukenda, dan Pak Supito. Ini adalah deklarator dari FUI. Kami selalu terus berdiskusi demi kemajuan pengembangan industri udang di Indonesia. Saya kira itu aja Pak Pamudi, mungkin acara bisa dilanjutkan. Terima kasih Pak Pamudi.